it's your first time, welcome. I hope everybody's coming to class happy and healthy and ready to do another painting. So today we're going a little bit into the West, American Southwest, I guess, if anyone's ever been to like Arizona or anywhere out that way. That's kind of what I was thinking for this painting. If you have ever been in one of my classes before, you might be looking at this painting and thinking, we've done things like this before, kind of a basic background, middle ground, foreground, pretty easy landscape. But this time we're focusing a lot on blending colors. We're going to have to mix a lot of colors. I'm going to be doing some different color things on my new canvas than I did on this first canvas. So if it's your 20th time doing this class, or if it's your first time doing this class, I encourage you to take some color choices into your own hands and take some risks, because there's not a lot of subject matter busyness going on in this painting. So where you really get to make it your own is in your color choices. So I encourage you to do so. As always, I have my basic paints, my black, my white. I have my red and my yellow definitely for this. And for this painting specifically, on this top portion, I have this phthalo blue. People say it all differently. But I used this blue instead of like an ultramarine, which I have both. So if you have this phthalo blue, I would definitely say go with that. It's a little bit warmer than like an ultramarine, which is a little bit more on the purple side. If you don't have this one, not a big deal. But if you do have the two, I would go with the phthalo. And so for this painting, as always, we're going to need our cup of water, something to put our paints in, a variety of brushes. There aren't too many little details in this painting, so I would say focus on your larger brushes, anywhere from your 2-inch to maybe a 3/4 inch. We'll do one smaller, either round or flat brush, whichever you have, to do little details like the moon and some of these little plants down here. But we don't need too many different size brushes for this painting. And so definitely have a rag or something, paper towels near you as always. But this painting, we're definitely going to be having to wash our brush a lot more than usual. So if you have like an old rag or anything that you can use to clean your brushes off in between colors, I would definitely recommend that. Or just grab a lot more paper towels than you usually do, because we're definitely going to need them. Another thing that we are likely going to need during this painting is a blow dryer. So if you have just your standard blow dryer, go ahead and grab that if you want to follow along right with the painting. But as I've said before, the good thing about doing these classes online is that you can pause and start the class whenever you want to. So if you don't have a blow dryer or just don't want to go that route, you can do whatever layer we're doing and then just take a 5-10 minute break. And acrylics dry pretty quickly, so it should dry in its own time. No need to rush it. So we'll get ourselves set up here. So we always start background, middle ground, foreground. And I'm going to do the very same today. And so if you're starting with your phthalo blue, you can go right in with that color on the top, which is what we're going to do. If you have an ultramarine or a blue that's not quite as dark as the blue that we're going to start with here, then you can add a teeny tiny touch of black into that to make it go this dark. You can always paint it on at first and see if it's not quite as dark as you want it. You can go in with a second coat. Usually if you have the phthalo blue and you put it on the first time, if you do it thick enough, you don't really need a second coat, but try the first layer, see what you get. and we will go from there. So you're going to take your, I have it's either a 1.5 inch or a 2-inch brush. We're going to start with one of your bigger brushes. If you only have like a real big brush like this, you can certainly start with this too. So we're going to take, I have a lot there, I don't want to spill it. We're going to take just our blue, our plain blue. We're going to start at the very top. A nice thick dark layer. And we're going to cover the whole top here. I'm only going to do this dark, dark, dark layer, maybe my brush width down. So again, that's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches down for this real dark layer. Again, if you paint it on and it's not quite dark enough, don't worry about it. You can either add a touch of black, just a little tiny bit, to your paint, or you can wait for this first layer to dry and go over with a second layer. Usually that second layer will darken it up a little bit. And we're going to get this as straight as we can, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Okay, so we have our very darkest layer. Make sure you're painting your edges on your left side, your right side. If you want to grab that top edge, do that. All right, so we have our dark blue, we're on our way. And so now we're going to start to go in with our white, and we're actually going to come down, start the white, and we're going to bring it up to meet the blue. Because the blue is so dark, if you kind of come into this dark, dark blue that we just started and try to bring it down, you're going to pull all that dark blue down and you're going to end up going way lower than you want to. So let's rinse our brush. Rinse it really good because we're going to be going in with a white. We don't want any of that dark blue in there. All right, dry it off. And we're working a little quickly here because we do want that blue to still be a little bit wet when we go in with the white so that it blends nice and smoothly. It helps that we put a thick layer of the blue down. But if we get to any point in this background where you feel like your brush is dragging a little and it's not blending the colors as easily as you think it should be, you can always go back and add more of each of the colors that you're blending, and that should help smooth it out a little bit. So we're going to dry very well. We're going to get some of our white. All right, we're going to take our clean brush. We're going to take a big scoop of just our white. And so we want this white to come between 1/4 and 1/3 of the way down the canvas. Where this line is isn't of super importance, whether it's more of 1/3 or whether it's a little higher to like 1/4 of the canvas. The breakup of where the colors in your sky start and finish is not going to change the final look of the painting. So if you feel like you like this blue transition a little bit more, then give yourself a little bit more room to do this blue. If you feel like you really like this kind of yellow-orange sunset area a little bit more, then leave yourself a little bit more room to do that. There are no wrong answers in this part here. Definitely not. And so I have from here to here is painted white, and I have this white still on my brush here. And so I have wet paint in 2 spots. I have my blue is still wet, you can kind of see it's shiny over here, and I have my white that's wet here. And so I'm not going to rinse my brush, I'm going to keep the same brush with my white paint on it. And what I'm going to start to do is ride my brush back and forth right in between where these 2 colors meet. Right? We're going to go back and forth, and they're going to start to blend together. The more you go over it, the more they will blend. Again, if you feel like your brush is dragging a little bit, add a little bit more paint. You can add a little more blue or a little more white, whatever you feel like your painting needs. Just back and forth, over and over. Make sure you're getting those edges. And since we don't have any clouds in the sky is kind of the main focal point here in our background, this nice sunset. We want to get this as smooth as we can. So again, we're going to go back and forth, over and over. We're going to get that nice and smooth. Alright, so we have a little bit of a transition. We still have our real dark blue at the top, then we have a little bit of our kind of medium in between blue, and it kind of fades down into a nice sky blue. Alright, and so I would say my white to blue transition, that ends about here. So mine's maybe a little closer to a third of the way down, but again, if yours is a little higher or a little lower, not a big deal. You're just going to pick up wherever your blue let off here. So we're going to rinse the brush again. We're going to keep using the same brush. If you have another of a similar size brush or another bigger brush, definitely use those guys if you don't feel like rinsing your brush every time. I will use 100 brushes before I rinse my brushes. I don't like rinsing them in between, but I'll do it for you guys. Alright, make sure you get all that water out of there, because the thing that you don't want to do is to have your brush leaking water. Alright, and so we have our blue to white transition, and now we're going to go from our white to our yellow to our orange transition. And like I said, in this one I might even do something a little different. I might throw a little purple in at the bottom, but we'll see what our painting tells us to do here. Ooh, I splashed a little white on here. I got a little excited, I guess. That's okay. Alright. So let's start by giving ourselves some yellow and some red to start us off. And so if you all have an orange in your painting toolkit, then definitely feel free to use that orange. I really only have primaries, so I'm going to be mixing my orange with my red and my yellow. But if you use it, or if you have it, definitely use it. So I have a little pot of yellow, I have a pot of just red, and I'm going to mix an orange in between the two. A little more yellow. So we're going red, yellow to make our orange, so that we can get that nice, smooth yellow, orange, red transition here. Alright, red, yellow, orange. Ooh, don't want to spill it. Alright, so same brush, and so we're going to do the same thing we did up here, like I said, except we're going to go in the reverse order. So we're going to start with our white, and then we're going to put in our yellow, our orange, our red. And so if you look in this painting, Our mountains start, again, a third of the way up, I'll say. We want them to have a little bit of height. And so you don't want to be concentrating really hard on making your colors go all the way down to the bottom here. If you put a real nice dark red in here and then you have to paint over it with your mountains, you're not going to be able to see it, and that's time wasted. So we don't want to do that. So I would say focus on making sure that all of your colors kind of end, I'll say, around a quarter of the way down the page. That way our mountains will overlap them just a little bit, just enough to make sure that we don't have any spaces in between, but so that we don't have to cover up any of the nice blending that we did. Okay, and so start with our white. Again, take a big section of white here. We're going to start right where we left off with our blue. And so what we don't want to happen here is we don't want our blue and our yellow to mix really. We have this kind of transition area here where it's kind of turning white. And that little white area serves as a buffer between the blue and the yellow, because when you mix your blue and your yellow, you get green, and we don't really want a green sky. It would look interesting, but we're gonna just stick with our yellow and our blue separately here. So I've painted my white down to just come over maybe the halfway point, and I'm gonna start to add in my yellow. Again, I'm adding it into that wet paint, so it should mix in there nice and easily. We're gonna do just like we did with the blue, back and forth. The yellow is going to kind of creep its way up into that white. Again, moving a little bit quickly so that we make sure the colors that we're blending into each other are both wet, and that's going to make them glide over each other as easily as possible. Because what we don't want is to have areas on our canvas that look like stripes. We don't want to have a blue section, a yellow section, a white section, a red section. We want them all to kind of bleed into each other. Okay, continuing down with our yellow. We're going to start to incorporate our orange. And so I'm not rinsing my brush. You can see I have my white, my yellow, and my orange here. I'm just going to add them all together. what you can also do, so if you have a spot like I do, see right here where you have kind of like a dark spot in your light yellow, what sometimes helps is if you take a dry brush. You see I just took this out of my little brush holder there. If you take a dry brush and wipe it over right where your two colors meet, like if you're having a little bit of trouble with that transition, take your dry brush. It kind of helps to blend the two together without adding or taking away any paint. So if you're struggling a little bit with that in-between section, try just grabbing another brush, a clean, dry, new brush to aid with that transition there. And again, make this canvas your own. If you feel like you really love this bright orange that you've made, definitely load up on it. If you like the kind of soft yellow a little bit more, then take more yellow, just add maybe a little orange at the bottom. Alright, so we're getting darker as we're getting down to the sunset here. And if we're doing a side-by-side here, if you look at my original and you look at my painting right now, you can see we're getting kind of into the area where the top of our mountains are starting. So this is going to be that opportunity for us, if you wanted to put in a little bit of a different color. Maybe I'll try that here. If you wanted to introduce a little purple into this nice sunset, we can definitely do that. Let me give that a try so you can see what it looks like, and then if you want to try it, you can. If you try it and you end up not liking it, you can always bring your mountains up a little bit higher and you'll cover that bottom section, and no harm done. So be adventurous, try something a little different. You never know, right? There are no mistakes in painting here. So what I did was I took a little bit of the blue that I already had from doing that top part of our canvas, and I mixed it with a little of the red that I already had, and I made just a tiny, tiny bit of purple. So the purple that I have is definitely on the redder side. It's not really a, like if you're getting more to the blue side of purple, you'll have like a lavender color. But what I'm looking for is like a deep, almost if you think of what like a purplish, if you think of like a wine color, I kind of have that going there because I want it to blend with my red. So let's try a little purple down here. And again, it's not a standalone color, it's going to mix with our red. And as you can see, I'm definitely not cleaning my brush in between these. Not cleaning the brush in between kind of helps the colors all blend together. If you feel like your brush is getting really muddy and your colors are just kind of coming out a little more blah instead of vibrant, you can definitely clean your brush, start over with a fresh one. All right, so look at that. I added a little bit of my dark purple at the bottom here. And again, it's not a super vibrant like grape purple that we're seeing here, like a purple that you'd see in a rainbow. It's definitely more of a subdued purple, but that's okay. Because we don't want it to stand out and look unnatural. You definitely want it to blend with your other colors. Alright, let's see. So I have a little bit of a lift from my colors over here where my paint was a little too thick, and then when I went over top of that paint, it kind of picked up from the brush. I'll fix it a little bit over here, but I'm not too worried about it because we're definitely going to be going over that section with some mountains. So, see, on this left side is where our little mountain range is going to go. So don't worry too much about the edges. Alrighty. Okay, so we have our background completely done here. And so this is the time where if you have a blow dryer, if you want to hit it with the blow dryer really fast, especially down here at the bottom because we're going to be doing the mountains, you can do that. If you just want to take a few minutes break and do that and let it air dry on its own, you can do that. But I am going to move right along to this next piece, just for the sake of time here. And so I'll say this next little part is optional. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but on the top here I have some little speckled stars just to go along with that moon, and really they're only in this little top dark blue section that we did first. If you like the way those look, you can add them in. If you don't like the way they look, you definitely don't have to add them. It does look nice if you have these really nice transitions and you want to leave that background kind of pure. You don't have to add these little stars in. But I know just from teaching classes, people love to do this little speckled paint effect. So if you want to do that, then let's do that quickly before we blow dry. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a brush with, I'll say, stiff bristles. If you have any like really old kind of dried up brushes, those definitely work the best for this. Don't ever throw those out because you'll always need them for something. If anything, if you only have nice new like soft bristled brushes, then take one with longer bristles because they'll kind of flick the paint easier. And there's a few ways to do this. I think I've done it in my classes where I take a brush and I do this kind of method where you get a lot of paint on the brush and you tap it on your finger, and so then the paint comes off the edge there. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently because I do want these stars to be really fine. The paint's going to come off the brush almost in like a mist, and so you're really only going to see them. I mean, I have a couple bigger spots here and here, but you're only really going to see them like very up close because I want them to be really distant. We're not painting a starry night on purpose. We want them just to be little details, right? So take just a little bit of white paint on your brush, not that much. And what you're going to do is you're going to kind of rake the bristles with your thumb in the direction of your painting. So like this, and you're going to see them kind of spray on here. Again, just a little bit. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so if you've chosen to do the stars, you've gotten to here, we'll take a minute, blow dry what we have, and then come back. We especially want to make sure that this section up at the top or on this left side, whichever side you decide you want to do your moon on, is dry, because we don't want the white paint of the moon to blend in with this dark blue that we have. Definitely focus on this bottom part to make sure this area is dry for when we lay our mountains down. This in-between part, not as important, but if you're hitting it with a blow dryer, you might as well just dry it all. So take a minute and do that. Okay, we've got our canvas dry. We're going to clean off our brushes. We're going to be moving into the mountain kind of ground landscape area. So I would say choose a brush. You can use the same one that you've been using for the whole time. If you want to switch down to something smaller, like maybe 1 inch or a 3/4 inch, you can do that. If you want to get some of these nice little peaked edges, you might need a smaller brush for that. Depending on the size of your canvas too, if you have a smaller canvas, definitely size down. But I'll clean them both off just in case. Dry them really good. And now when it comes to these mountains, what we're going to be doing just very generally is mixing up 3 tones for our mountain range. So we're going to have a light, a medium, and a dark tone of whatever color that you choose. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a red or an orange, like I did mine kind of a rusty orange color. If you want to do yours in shades of blue, that would be really nice too. So like a very light pale blue, a medium blue, and a dark blue. If you wanted to do yours in shades of purple, a very light like lavender purple, a medium purple, a dark purple, the possibilities with this part are endless. So choose a color that you like, that you think goes with your canvas. Doesn't necessarily have to be just like mine. Definitely get a little creative here. And so we're going to start by just mixing up those colors, whatever color you choose for that section. I'm going to stick with what I did this first time. So I'm going to mix up a very light orange to start. So we're going to start with our lightest color because that's the one that's farthest in the background. And then as we come closer to the foreground and we go into our darker tones, we're just going to keep adding color to our color that's already mixed. So we don't need to mix 3 separate individual colors necessarily. We're just going to keep adding to the ones that we have. So for your first lightest tone, no matter what color you're doing, you're probably going to have something in the, we'll say the pastel family, but a little bit on the darker pastel side. Mine's looking a little bit like it's almost like a salmon-y color, I guess. Alright, so if you look at that pot, we're kind of in the pastel area. And this is, again, going to be our lightest tone. That we're going to start with this mountain range in the very back, and as we get to the front, it's going to get darker and darker. And so these can kind of take the shape of, I'll say, a valley. And so what I kind of tried to do is make mine a little bit higher on the sides, dip down a little bit in the middle so that you can see all this nice dark color that you had, and then kind of peek back up on the edges. So they're going to kind of take this shape. You can definitely shape your mountains however you want. Again, there's no right or wrong answers, but if you have any of this nice like color blending down here and you don't want to cover that up completely, definitely leave little spots of that peeking through. So we're going to start with this first color here. And so I just did some real basic mountain shapes, and what you want to do is you're just going to make peaks and valleys, try to avoid very straight lines. So in here you can see it's very jagged, there's little bumps and ridges all the way along. That's going to make it look a little more natural. So again, anything that's not like super straight across is going to look great. If you want a little bit more of the shelf-like mountain ranges that you might see in, I think of like Utah when I think of this kind of mountain or this type of landscape, you can do those. And so the only difference here is going to be that the tops of your mountains, so your peaks, are going to be a little flatter. And so I'll do that on this side. So I'm going to come maybe a third of the way up. Again, I'm going to dip down in the middle a little bit. I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to come over. We're going to fill in as we go. Do the same thing over here. Maybe this side will be a little bit lower. Okay, so I have my kind of top ridge line, and then I'm going to fill in down here, and you don't need to fill all the way to the bottom by any means. We are just filling in what we're going to see peeking out from behind the second mountain range. If you have a very light color for this first set of mountains, which you likely do, and if your sky background got very dark at the bottom here, you might have to do a second coat just to make sure that that covers all the way and you're not seeing any of that sky through the background of your first mountains, because we definitely don't want that. Just see what your canvas needs. If you don't need it, then that's great. Alright, so I came, let's see, I have maybe a quarter of the canvas left at the bottom here. And so this bottom edge of your first mountain range does not need to be straight or perfect looking by any means, because it's going to be covered up. You just want to make sure you're bringing it down low enough so that your second mountain range will cover, right? And so we have that first mountain range in, and I'm going to start to build my second mountain range color. So you're going to be in the same family, and so again, I'm just adding to the very same pot of color that I had before. I'm just adding more of my colors and less white. So I'm right in that same little area here. This is going to be your second color, so it's going to be kind of your medium tone of whatever color you've chosen. Add just a touch of white to mine, because we don't want it too dark. Remember, we have 3 steps, so we're going to do one that's even darker than this. Alright, so I've got my number 2 color in there. If you want to compare, just hold your brush up, make sure you've kind of gone to that next level. Maybe I'll do a touch more red. And then for the second mountain range, we're going to do the same thing. So you're just going to start building your little mountain peaks. They're going to overlap that first mountain range that you already did. Definitely make sure you leave some of that first mountain range sticking out. You definitely don't want to cover the whole thing. But you're going to be covering a majority of that bottom part. So if you put a lot of paint on that first layer and you want to hit it with the blow dryer, you can do that. You shouldn't need it though, because each layer of the mountains are going to be pretty thick. And so this paint should cover that first one right up, but if you start putting it on and you're seeing that it's not covering all the way, feel free to pause right here. You can give it a little blow dry and then come right back into it. And so we're going to take our second mountain range here, and I'll start in the middle. Just to reiterate, there is no right or wrong way to do this. It does not need to be taller on the edges, that's just the way that I like to frame it. But it doesn't need to be that way by any means. Alright, again, give yourself a little bit of a, I'll say a buffer zone at the bottom here. Make sure if your sky is poking through, cover that right up. So I would say I have maybe an inch or two of blank canvas left at the bottom. You should have a little bit of space left. Okay, so there are my second set of mountains. And so we're going to go right into our third set. Again, we're just going to add right into that paint that we had from before. The same colors, that whatever colors you have been using, you're just going to add a little bit more of the color, a little bit less white. This one I'm going to start by not adding any white. I had a little bit of that color left over. And that color that's left over from my previous set of mountains, the white that was in that color should be enough to get me through. Shouldn't have to add any more white, because again, this is going to be our darkest level of mountains aside from the kind of black layer that we have in the very, very foreground. But we'll see. If you want your mountains to be lighter, you can definitely add that little white if it goes better with the tones that you've mixed up. Alright, so there I have my next darkest color here. And we're going to go into our third set of mountains. Same thing that we did with our first and our second. Okay. And now you don't need to go all the way down to the bottom because again we have this kind of darker foreground, but if you're right there and you have the paint, why not, I guess. If you have a big area at the bottom though, don't feel like you need to fill it all in. Okay. So I'm gonna throw that brush in the water, and right now we're gonna do just a little detailing. You can see on this first copy here, wow, it's very hard to see. Let's see if I move a little closer. It's very subtle. But if you see on this third layer of mountains that we do, I have a couple little plant areas here, just so you can kind of see something in the background so that there's a little something going on in these layers. So if you want to do that, now's the time. Again, you certainly don't have to, but let's pick out the brush. Something on the smaller side. Okay. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to take this, any of that leftover color that you have of the last mountain range that we just did, and we're just going to add some little bits of plant life, and they're going to stick right up off of this third mountain range that we did. And again, if you look over here, mine are very small. They're probably only, I don't know, maybe a ½ inch tall, because if you think about it, they're way farther in the background than these guys are in the foreground. So it's just a little tiny detail if you want to get a little bit of that cactus shape practice in. Doesn't have to be very precise. If you want to do just a little bit of like grassy plants, you can do that. If you don't want to do any of this at all, you don't have to. But so we'll come right up off this mountain. We will do a couple here. Wouldn't spend too much time on these guys, because don't forget that we don't really know where these bigger guys in the foreground are going to be. So you don't want to spend too long doing these little detail guys and then they get covered up by one of your plants in the foreground. So just maybe a little plant here or there will be more than enough to get the idea across that at this point in our foreground, middle ground, background, you may be able to see a little bit of that plant life, right? We'll just give them a little glimpse to start with. Okay. And so now, I know everybody's going to say that this is the tricky part, and it is, so take your time with it, I guess. If you want to seek out some kind of stencil, you can do that, but I encourage you to try at least once by yourself. We're going to come up here into the moon, and so for that we are just going to need some white, some plain white, and I chose a very thin crescent moon because it's a really simple landscape. I didn't think that a big round moon would go with what we had. So if you want to do like a half moon, or I don't know what all the phases names are, but if you want to do a little bit of a thicker moon, if you feel more comfortable with like a thicker shape, then you can certainly do that. If you want to kind of test yourself and do like a very thin moon, then you can try this along with me. If you're feeling really uncomfortable about making the circle, that's certainly okay too. If you want to get like maybe the bottom of a mug or something like that and trace just 3/4 of the way around and use that just as a guide you can do that. I would just say be very careful if you're going to put it down on your canvas. Make sure that this whole top part is very, very dry before you do that, because the last thing that you want to do is make an imprint of the cup or whatever you're using to trace on the canvas. So just be wary if you're going to use something like that. And so you're going to choose which side you want your moon on. If you feel like you didn't blend very well in one spot, you can definitely throw it on that side. Whatever you think, wherever it fits best on your canvas. And I would say don't be afraid to make it too big. I mean, like I said, we don't have too much going on in this, so like a nice big moon would be okay here, especially because it's thin, at least the one that I did. So if the size is larger, but the moon is a little bit thinner, then you get kind of the dramatics of having that like nice big moon in the sky without it being too overwhelming to what's in the painting. And so I'm gonna stick mine. Maybe I'll throw it on this side just for fun. Give me a little something different. Okay, so I'm gonna choose where I want my moon, and I'm gonna start with, I have a very small brush here, and I'm gonna start with just 3/4 of a circle that is just this brush length. So I'm not gonna start making the width of the moon at all. I'm just gonna start with my outline of my shape, and I'm gonna go very, very lightly. I'm just kind of getting a tracing. Okay, and so you can barely see that right here. I have kind of my outline of my moon, and I did it very, very lightly at first, just a little tiny bit of paint on my brush, because I want to make sure that I got that circle shape right. And so I'm just going to keep going back over it again with just a little bit of paint on my brush, and making it a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker as I go, just in the center area. You definitely want it to taper off and get nice and thin on these edges. So I would say start in the middle and work your way towards those edges. If you're painting upright, like I am, or on an easel or something, I definitely recommend putting the canvas flat. It's a little bit tricky to do upright, like I'm doing it. I want to make sure you guys can see what I'm doing, but it's generally easier for people to paint with their canvas down on the table, because if you think about it, not a lot of people are used to painting, but a lot of people are used to writing, and you write flat on a desk or a table usually, so this position is usually more comfortable for people to paint than this position. So if you are upright and you're having a little bit of trouble, at least for this part, try to find yourself a flat surface. Okay, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna take my own advice here. If you've ever been in one of my in-person classes, one of my favorite things to say is that if you get something to the point where you like the way it looks, you're like, oh yeah, that's okay, stop. Because especially with something that's thin like this, you might look at it and say, oh yeah, that looks good. Oh, but this little place, you know, is bothering me. And then the more you do it, then you have a moon this wide, and you're like, oh, I should have just left it. Um, Painting is one of those things where restraint is one of the hardest things to learn. So if you get to a point with it where you're like, oh yeah, what a great moon, that's where you stop. Okay? I have trouble with that one, kind of holding myself back. So take a page out of my book, and when you are set with your moon, just leave it at that, and we'll go on here. So the only thing we have left to do here is this kind of bottom area, and so I'm gonna grab one of my brushes. I'm gonna grab my smaller, maybe 3/4 inch or inch brush, just to do the land part. So if you want to grab your bigger brush that you were using before, you can grab the bigger one. No big deal. We're not doing any details right now at this point. So whatever brush you feel like works. I'm going to grab just my plain black paint. Give myself some of that. So I'm going to come down at the very bottom here and start to give myself these little hills that are going to finish up our bottom edge of our painting. The same thing that I said before, there's no right or wrong way to do these. Make sure that you've gotten all your edges. If you've been painting along on the sides. And that is our last layer. And now if you want to get a little bit more layering in this section, I don't know if you can see this, if I bring it a little closer, I put a little bit of highlight on some edges here, so even within this black part, we're getting the layering of seeing that these two kind of hills are in front of this back one. And so what that allows us to do is put some bigger cacti in what is the closest foreground, and some little smaller guys in this, which is the farther of the close background, if that makes sense. So this is like your up close view, and this is kind of a little bit farther back than this. And so it really allows you to push that perspective of this is closest, this is maybe a little bit farther away, and this is maybe even a little bit farther away than that. So if you're wanting to do that, once you have your black laid out here, you can take a little bit of one of these orangey or yellow colors, or whatever color you've done these background mountains in. If you did purples or blues or yellows, take whatever color you used for those on the same brush, just a little bit, and you're going to use that to highlight just the front edge of this hill here. And so what that's going to do is bring one of these little hills kind of in front of the other one. Now it doesn't need to be a big bright area of color. It's pretty subtle. You can see, let's see, just a little bit here, a little bit here, just to push that perspective a little bit farther. Alrighty, so we're almost there. We're just gonna do that little bit of plant life from that foreground, and then we're gonna call it. And so I would say take a pause right now, and we want to blow dry definitely this bottom part. This paint on mine is very wet because it was pretty thick, so make sure that's dry. This middle part of your canvas should be pretty dry by now if you haven't put anything over it so far, but definitely just make sure this bottom part is dry because we're going to be overlapping it with the black paint in the front here. So take a moment to do that, or again, pause the video, take a break, come back in a few minutes when that is most of the way dry. Okay, now here we are, last phase here. And so we're gonna grab a brush. I'll stay on the smaller side. We definitely have some bigger pieces to do here, but none of them should be so big that you're having to use like a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch brush. Definitely take something on the smaller side because it's easier when we get to these smaller guys to kind of work with. And so for this part, we're only going to be needing to use that black paint. These plant areas that I have here are kind of silhouetted, so we don't need to worry about shadows or anything like that. The most important part of this part, I would say, is kind of planning where you want your focal point to be. So obviously in this one, my focal point is I have a larger cactus on this left side, kind of a medium one on the right side, and a smaller one in the middle, and I have a couple other various little plant life pieces in between. And so before I go on and do one whole cactus, like I said, I'm going to kind of plan where I want everything to be. So I'm going to do like I did with the moon, where I'm just going to start with some fine lines. I'm not going to render the whole cactus at once. And so, since I kind of went opposite here with the moon, maybe I'll put my big cactus here on the right, and then I'll put some smaller ones over on the left. And so, if you're a little bit worried about getting your cactus straight, I'll give you a little tip. If you put your brush straight up where you want to put your cactus, then touch it to your canvas and give yourself a little dot. Turn your brush over so that your bristles are at the bottom. Line it up as straight as you can with that dot you made at the top. And put a dot at the bottom. So if you see, I have one dot here, one dot down here, and that'll kind of help you make that straight line. So I'm going to glide down. Again, just giving myself a guideline here so I can kind of see where I'm going with it. So he's probably going to come out like this. Just a very basic plan of what I'm going to have here. All right, so that's going to be my number one guy. Maybe I'll come over on this side. I'll do a medium-sized one. Maybe I'll have one even farther over here. Just a little guy. And maybe one here. Alright, so you can put as many or as few as you want to. If you are more well versed in the plant life of the American Southwest and you feel like you can do more than a cactus or maybe some grasses that I did, definitely feel free to do that. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. And so once we have our plan of where we're going to put everything, then we can kind of start to fill them out. And so I did my cacti first, rather than doing these kind of smaller guys, because I want to fill in my cacti, see where I have open spaces and what could maybe go in those spaces, but I want to see what my cacti look like first, because they're kind of the focal point. And so I'm going to start to fill those out. And if you've ever taken a class with me, I've given this instruction for trees before, where I always say start them thinner than you think you're going to need them, and build them up thicker as you go, because if you just start with a really wide base, you're always going to need to take some time evening it out, and then it's going to end up getting maybe thicker than you want it. So start on the thinner side, get thicker at the base, only as you need. And so in my experience, seeing cacti, at least this type that I have kind of painted here, I think that they have kind of sections, right? So if you look at this one specifically, I kind of come down in a sort of straight line, and then it dips in right here. I come down on this side, it dips in a little bit. So don't worry about making like a very straight, like telephone pole looking cactus. You want them to kind of bevel in like an hourglass in certain areas. So you're just going to tuck it in and come right back out. Less of an hourglass shape. More you're just going to taper it and then bring it back out in one point. Because cacti are definitely not perfectly straight. It will look much more natural if you give it little curves here and there than if it's just pinned straight all the way down. Alright, so I think that's good for my body. I'll do my little arms here. And so I chose to make these kind of thinner cacti. I know there's kind of those shorter squatter ones that are really popular. You can definitely do those if you want to look up what some different cacti look like. If you like the way that some look better than others, definitely feel free to do that. I'm just kind of running on instinct with this one, I guess. Don't know what type of cactus this is. Alright, and so the same way that you would draw trees with branches, you want the arms of your cacti to get a little bit thicker as they get closer to the base of your cactus. Alright, I'm going to come over here to my big guy. Sorry that my chair is so squeaky. So again, I'm just starting with like a very thin line. I want to get it as reasonably straight as I can. I don't have to go crazy with that. And then I'm going to start to add volume on either side once I get the basic shape down. baby arm here. When you're drawing your plants, I would say give them a little variety. Try to stay away from making all of your cacti look exactly the same. So if you have one like this, where it's just your straight base and then it has two arms coming off the side, try not to make them all just that kind of three-pronged way. Give them, you know, maybe I'll do a little one up here to give it a little bit of a difference from that second one that I made. Change it up. My little guy in the background here. And then I'll have my last over here. And they don't all need to have two arms. Maybe this guy just has one. Arms, branches. I don't know the right word for that for a cactus. Alright, so we've got our main players in there. And so now what you can do, if you are feeling so inclined, you can add some smaller cacti, some little grasses or things like that in the foreground. If you chose to do fewer cacti and you have some space left over, you can do that. What I would try not to do is make them all equidistant from each other. So what I wouldn't really do for this one is put something right here, because then it's going to look really stale. So it's okay if one of your grasses is almost touching one of your cacti, or even if it's overlapping at the bottom. That's totally okay. If you look over here, I have this one really close over here. I have this one kind of almost falling into this little crevice here, and that's okay because the way you would be looking at something in real life, things would be overlapping and next to each other, and some closer and some farther away. So to avoid it looking a little too staged, I would say vary those spaces in between your plants. Alright, so let's see. Maybe next to this guy, I'll do maybe something like this. And again, this is not a known plant life to me. I'm kind of just winging it here, but if you do know certain types of plants that you want to include, you can do that. Maybe I'll come in with like a little cactus next to this one. This one I do have a specific plant in mind. If you've ever seen those, I don't know if it's a prickly pear cactus or the ones that have kind of those round paddles that kind of just stack on top of each other. And I'm not totally sure of the name, but I want to do something like that. We're just kind of making it up here. Maybe I'll come over here and do, again, just some simple grass, some aloe, whatever you've got in mind. Alright, so we're going to add in whatever little details that we want, and that completes the painting. Right, so we've got a nice little landscape. We really push those boundaries of background, middle ground, foreground in this, so I hope you kind of are able to see that real exaggerated depth, especially with our different toned mountains, our foreground, our really colorful background. And so let me know what you guys want to do next time if you have a certain thing in mind. We're going into September, which I know this year is going to be derby season. I know we already did a derby painting. We're also going into fall if you all want to do anything fall related. leave in the comments. Definitely let me know. As always, if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me again in the comments, let me know, and I can try to help as much as I can from a distance. And let me know what you guys think.